Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. The black and tan sofa was warm. When I sat down, it was icy. She's coming home soon. She was always at home when the children got off the school bus. I closed the curtains because the sunlight coming through the living room window was depressing. Right now, today, the darkness seemed to be warning and soothing. I was not eager to engage in a confrontation. I was ill-prepared both mentally and emotionally to deal with it. Most of all, I was afraid of my anger. As a child, I was prone to outbursts of anger. As an adult, I wasn't sure. Anyway, it had to happen quickly because the school bus was supposed to arrive in about an hour. They can't know. I will do everything in my power to keep them from finding out. 10 years of marriage have gone to waste. 10 years of my life have been wasted. 10 years of planning and dreaming are wasted. I didn't have a future to look forward to. Nothing. A reasonable person would think about what he is going to say or how he is going to approach the upcoming discussion. Every time I tried to come up with a witty remark or comment, I couldn't do anything. It always brought back the same question. Self-pity? I felt sorry for myself and regretted what my children might have to go through. It was unacceptable. I had no plan of action. I sat stupidly and waited for the situation to develop. I wasn't ready. I was finishing the rest of my warm beer when she opened the door. "John, why the hell are you sitting in the dark?" She went to the window to pull back the curtains. "No, let them stay closed for a while." It was an unusual situation. I've never been home in the middle of the day. I was always at work. Maybe that was part of the problem. She looked thoughtful as she took off her purse and jacket. "Are you sick?" "No. Just depressed and disappointed." "Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything I can do?" "There's nothing you can do, but I want to talk about it. I just don't know how or where to start." "Is everything okay at work?" "Stop it. Please stop. Just sit down and listen. I'll try to say what I have to say." "You don't have to say anything. Actually, I'd rather you didn't say anything." Courtney sat and looked at her hands. I heard her mutter softly to herself, "Oh shit. I know about you and Mitch Cooper." She slowly looked up at me, and even in the dimly lit room I could see the moisture in her eyes. Not tears, but almost. She started to say something, but I raised my hand. I didn't know what to do. I had no plan of action. In desperation, I threw an empty bottle of long neck across the room and headed for the front door. She stood up, but did nothing to try to stop me. Recovery. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. Questions of this kind were alien to me. First of all, they were children. Courtney and I both grew up in dysfunctional families. I swore that no matter what, my children would never have to go through this. This meant that divorce was out of the question. It also meant that I couldn't leave them. I was totally fucked. My first stop was Gilbert Enterprises. There was enough time in the schedule for a vacation, and I had no problems getting a week off. I had a small staff, but they were all competent and could carry out my duties in my absence. I started working at the company 12 years ago as an apprentice draftsman, and now I was in charge of the entire graphics department, including a small staff of maintenance staff. I worked hard and was rewarded for my efforts. It looks like the summer trip to Dollywood is out of schedule. Shortly after I started working at the company, I met Courtney. I've always been a little puzzled by how we met. It was something like a party at one of the engineers' houses. I was there, and suddenly she was there with me. It's not like I was stalking her or anything. She started chatting, which was unusual because girls usually avoided me. I wasn't what you'd call the right guy. I was too thin, too tall, and too goofy. Courtney was a year older than me in high school and hung out with the cool guys. In fact, I remembered that she spent a lot of time with one of the guys who imitated Fonzie. Yes, you guessed it. His name was Mitch. One thing led to another, and less than a year later we got married and got pregnant. At that time, everything seemed normal and understandable. I was happy, and she seemed happy. Courtney was practically normal in every way. She did not stand out from the crowd and in no way attracted attention to herself. In my opinion, she was perfect. A year after the birth of our son Bobby, our daughter Dany was born. Everything was just great. For 10 years. Usually people spend large amounts in restaurants when they celebrate something. I ended up spending an exorbitant amount at my favorite sushi bar to drown out my sorrows. There was nothing unusual on the menu, and I tried all those delicacies that I always refused because of the price. 2 hours later, I found myself at the Best Western Hotel, and I was parting with my expensive pleasure. I needed a plan. I needed help. I had a whole week to come up with something. Collecting facts. There was no point messing with insurance, checks, or credit cards. There was nothing to change here. Our way of life should have remained the same. I knew that some kind of explanation would be required from Courtney, but I really didn't want it. If she confessed everything and I was forced to accept what she told me, then I would officially become a cuckold. I couldn't figure out how to avoid it. There was no way she could or would deny it. It wasn't in her nature. I had no idea about the depth of their relationship. I didn't know how long it had been going on or how serious it was. Was she planning to leave me? There are too many unanswered questions. I finally found some old school friends who were aware of Mitch and Courtney's relationship. The interesting thing is that they never seemed to break up. As far as everyone knew, they had always been a couple. Some of them knew that I had married Courtney, but that was all. Mitch Cooper was a handsome guy and very charismatic, the exact opposite of me. He also did not have great ambitions either in his studies or in his career. He barely graduated from high school and has been working at a local Firestone tire company store for the last 10 years. He was not a manager, but just a tire fitter. There's nothing wrong with being a tire fitter, but at some point most people become store managers. Mitch was still working at the entry level and seemed happy with it. I was confused. What attracted you to him? I worked tirelessly to provide for my family and was rewarded with betrayal. I think other women would appreciate my efforts, but none of them have ever shown interest in me. I was with Courtney because she wanted me to be with her. But then why? I spent the whole day talking to old friends, acquaintances, and classmates. Comparing all this, I got a pretty clear picture. Courtney and Mitch never fought. As far as everyone knew, they had always been a couple, and many of them assumed that they still were. I never asked her about her relationship with him. I didn't want to know. I assumed that this was an old story and that it had moved on. I wasn't jealous, I didn't suspect, and I wasn't worried about my marriage. I think it was my mistake. Now I knew I had to stand up to her. It would be difficult for me, and I'm sure it would be for her. I just hoped she hadn't hurt me too much. Of course, I still had no idea what I was hoping to achieve or how I was going to fix the problem. Answers. The next evening, I managed to get a small private table at Luciano's. We could talk without fear of being overheard or interrupted. Courtney showed up exactly at the appointed time. She looked good, but she was worried about something. She sat down and smiled, but didn't say anything. We ordered, ate, and enjoyed the wine. It was awkward, to say the least. None of us mentioned the problem. Finally, the coffee arrived, and I decided to open Pandora's box. Can I get some explanation without emotional rhetoric? Instead of trying to explain, could you give me an idea of what exactly you want to know? Perhaps it will be easier and faster this way. Was this a way to avoid revealing something I didn't know about, or was it an honest response to my request? How long? It was a short question, and I was hoping that I would get a short answer. 12 years old. Needless to say, I was shocked, and I'm sure it showed on my face. She noticed my reaction and looked away, avoiding my gaze. Did you date him the whole time we were married? Yes. There was no embellishment in her answer. It was short and to the point. She sat in silence, waiting for my next question. I could hardly stay in place. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, but I really needed a better answer. I motioned for the waiter to top up the coffee. Everything was not going as I expected. Why did you marry me? I tried to keep the question simple, but I felt that the answer to this one would be more complicated. In short, because you could have given me something he couldn't or didn't want. This answer raised a whole bunch of new questions. I didn't dare ask too quickly because I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. I was surprised at my own ability to hold back, and then realized that I was actually becoming intrigued by the course of the conversation. But why did you choose me? I didn't do it. He did it. Courtney, I think we've come to the point where you're going to have to stop giving me short answers. I want and need an explanation. I promise I'll sit here and keep quiet until you explain all this in a way that makes sense. Okay, but before I start, please believe me that in no case was there any attempt to show malice or harm you in any way. We have never done or said anything that could cause disrespect to you. Apart from the fact that she deliberately turned me into a cuckold, I had to agree with her. I nodded for her to continue. Mitch and I have been very close for many years and have sworn allegiance to each other. We were really in love, just like in movies and trashy romance novels. As corny as it may sound, we were real soulmates. We had one big problem that we couldn't handle. I wanted to have a home and a family, and Mitch flatly refused to even think about it. After many months, we finally decided that we would try to find a surrogate husband. We had no idea what we were doing, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. It wasn't so easy to find the right guy. It had to be someone who, in our opinion, could provide a stable environment and at the same time be a good companion. You were our last choice. Believe it or not, John, you were the best of the best. That's why we chose you. I waved to the waiter to pour more coffee. It was too ridiculous to believe. Courtney, I don't want to interrupt you, but are you saying that you plan to live with me as husband and wife, but leave Mitch as your lover and soulmate? Yes. And the children? Are these my children? Yes. You can check it out if you think it's necessary. Returning home, the evening ended quickly. I found that I couldn't find the words. The conversation ended, and we both just sat and looked at each other. Of course, I still had a lot of questions, but emotions overwhelmed me, and I was afraid of losing control. I needed to process the information I received and do it calmly, without interference. The next few days were depressing. It was hard for me to understand how she could so easily accept me as a love partner when she was so madly in love with Mitch. They both knew that their plan was for Courtney and me to make love. Should he have convinced her to sleep with me, or should she have convinced him to accept it? Looking back, I can't remember a single time when there was an intense romantic relationship between them. It all seemed platonic and very laid back. Most of the information I had came after I accidentally found a text message on her phone. This led to a deeper investigation, which confirmed my suspicions. I could only return for a short period of time, but I noticed that they only met once or twice a month, so to speak. I wouldn't call it a hot and stormy affair. I had no idea how stressful it was at the beginning of our marriage. I was sure she had brought him up to date on the situation, and I was sure they had come together to discuss how they were going to deal with it. Courtney told the kids that I was away on a business trip. In order to maintain stability in the family, I had to return home and behave as normally as possible. By the end of the week, I was back in the house and in my bedroom. Apart from the lack of love, our lives have returned to normal. I signed up for the gym. I wasn't overweight or flabby, but I wasn't handsome either. I felt like I was competing for my own wife now, even though I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay with her. Although I didn't have a specific plan, I was motivated to keep myself in better shape and be healthier. I started getting up earlier. I had a protein shake for breakfast and then went straight to the gym before everyone else got out of bed. I took a shower at the gym and went straight to work. One day, cardio training, and the next day, fitness and strength training. I found myself becoming obsessed with exercise. I started working longer and more often on weekends. I volunteered for trips and seminars. Anything to distract myself for a while. I was amazed that I was able to maintain a normal relationship with Courtney in such circumstances. We have never discussed this issue. The only time anything has changed is in the bedroom. We were in limbo, without direction, without a plan, without a future. It seemed to me that I was living with a housekeeper with whom I happened to share a bed. I needed help, evaluations. Spending an hour on a treadmill or exercise machine 4 days a week gives you a lot of time to think. I liked being married. I've never imagined myself married to anyone other than Courtney. I still couldn't. Although I could not forgive her betrayal, I was a little embarrassed by it. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. She was married to me, but she was sleeping with someone else. Therefore, I was a cuckold. Or was it him? The man she cheated on me with was her partner for many years before I met her. Did she cheat on me with him, or did she cheat on him with me? It was so easy to get confused. Does a piece of paper called a marriage certificate matter, or is it all about the perception of a relationship? Courtney and Mitch had different attitudes towards family and marriage. Somehow, unknowingly, I got involved in this story and was used to resolve the conflict. The price Mitch had to pay to make Courtney happy was that he let me take her in a loving way. Knowing how close they were, It must have been difficult for him to make this decision. However, I was being used, and I didn't like it. However, it seemed to me that I was getting a lot of benefit from the deal. I was struggling with my own mental dilemma for about 2 weeks, and then decided that since I wasn't going to divorce Courtney and wasn't going to leave, I was going to keep making love to her. I will try my best not to get bitter and not to be vindictive. Before starting this new phase of my marriage, I also decided that some basic rules should be established. On the same day, I booked a table for dinner at a restaurant. Agreement. The evening started sluggishly, just like last time. Courtney seemed hesitant to start any conversation. I wanted to tell you everything, but I couldn't bring myself to start. The waiter broke the silence. Can I get you anything else? There was nothing dramatic about it, but it helped us to talk. Just pour some more coffee, please. I think it's time for us to finish. They seemed to be impatient to close as soon as possible. Courtney, I'd like things to go back to normal if we could. Under the circumstances, there are a few things that I think we should agree on. There's nothing complicated about it, and if you don't like what I'm going to offer, I'm ready to listen to some counteroffer. She nodded at me to continue and smiled slightly. First of all, if you don't mind, I'd like to start making love again. Sleeping together is great, but I really miss love. I may have some difficulties at first, but I hope that over time I will get over it and everything will return to normal. Do you have any problems with that? Courtney nodded her head and mouthed, okay. Secondly, I would like us to continue living together as husband and wife until the children grow up. When there are no more children at home, we will quietly divorce and go our separate ways. We expect Dany to go to college or get married in about 10 years. Can you hold out that long? There was a slight pause, as if she was deep in thought. John, are you saying that if everything goes well, we will continue to live together until there are no children left in the house, and then we can break up? No. Then we'll split up. This is not an option. But what if? She never finished the sentence. I looked at her, waiting for a more definite answer. Finally, she looked up and mouthed, okay again, but this time without smiling. Finally, I feel that it's okay for you to continue your relationship with Mitch, but I insist that you do it in a way that I don't know about. I'm not happy about the situation, but I feel like it would be difficult and stressful for both of us if I insisted that you stop seeing him. I cannot and will not waste time and effort trying to break yours. I never finished this sentence. I didn't wait for an answer from my wife. I got up, threw 3 20s on the table, and held a chair for her so we could leave. The trip home was quiet. There was no love that night. My big mistake. The conditions that I have set out have never been openly discussed. They seemed to be accepted automatically as soon as I submitted them. We started making love again. It wasn't great at first, but gradually we got used to each other, and everything got better. Family life has returned to normal. As love got better, he got a little rougher. I didn't do it on purpose, but I think a sense of competition was growing in me, so I tried harder. I have become more demanding about the types of love and its frequency. Courtney never refused or complained. After a while, the novelty wore off, and I found myself returning to it. I think I was trying to prove my point. The most unusual thing I realized was that over time I stopped feeling like I was being cuckolded. Technically, I think it was, but mentally I started to look at it differently. Courtney was Mitch's woman. She had always been his woman. I used her the way I wanted, anytime I wanted, and there was nothing he could do about it. Of course, I fed her, provided shelter and clothes, but I convinced myself that this was payment for her services and taking care of the children. I didn't know about the time she spent with him, as agreed. What I didn't know didn't hurt me. One day, when my car needed an oil change, I decided to stop by the Firestone store where Mitch worked. While the car was being serviced, I stood in front of a glass display case that overlooked the maintenance department and looked at my wife's lover. He didn't pay attention to it at first, but after a while it became obvious. He stopped for a moment and realized who I was. I'm sure he's seen me before, but never under these circumstances. He worked with the tire remover for almost an hour, and I watched him. I didn't flinch once, and he noticed it. When my car was finally ready, I walked away from the window and drove away. He looked confused the whole time. I felt some relief, but not much. A week later, I took Courtney's car for an oil change and did the same thing. After about half an hour, he just stopped working and stood staring at me. With a wide grin on my face, I gave him 2 thumbs up and laughed. He couldn't hear me, but he saw it. I moved away from the window and soon left there. The next day, everything went to pieces. When I returned home from work, I noticed that the children were not there. There was no dinner, but Courtney was waiting. "You're disgusting." It was a good start, and there was still something ahead. I sat down while she walked around the kitchen table, glaring at me. "In 10 years, Mitch and I have never humiliated you or disrespected you in any way. For 10 years, we've been paying as much attention to you as we can to make sure everything goes smoothly. Now you've decided you want to be an asshole. You come to his place of work and make a fool of him. You insult him in front of his colleagues and laugh at it. You have everything: a good home, a good job, wonderful children, and a wife. He doesn't have anything, but you feel like you have to humiliate him even more. It was a disgusting act, and now I'm ashamed to be your wife." I didn't move. She was right. "We have an agreement, and I'm willing to honor it. But if you embarrass me like that again, I'm going to walk out the door and take the kids with me." I didn't answer. "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. I'm going to take a shower. Call and order a pizza. The children stayed the night with your parents." While I was waiting for the pizza, I realized one important thing. I was an asshole. Moving on. The next day, Courtney returned to normal. No one else mentioned my stupidity. I never went into the Firestone store again. I started to focus on work and children. Everything went smoothly for the next few years. It seemed that these few weeks had been erased from our collective consciousness. I didn't check on her in any way. It wasn't that I didn't care, but rather that I didn't want to know. Gilbert Enterprises rewarded my efforts with a pay raise and a promotion. Now I was also the head of the department. My knowledge in this area was weak, but I knew how to use my people effectively, and it bore fruit. Our friends and relatives never found out about the problem with cheating, and we successfully imagined ourselves as a loving, happy family. As far as I know, the children had no idea about anything. Surprisingly, I didn't feel bitter. I really enjoyed our relationship and communication with Courtney. Sometimes I thought about her and Mitch, but it passed quickly. I convinced myself that it wasn't me who was the cuckold, but Mitch. I stole his woman and used her. It was a little crazy, but I was able to come to terms with it. Bobby graduated from high school and immediately joined the Air Force. Dany got a good scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, and we had enough savings to cover all her other expenses. The day after Dany left, Courtney and I met. "You knew this day would come." "Yes. Mitch will be happy that it's finally over." "John, I haven't seen or spoken to Mitch in over 6 years. I have no idea where he is now." It was good news, but I tried not to show it. Of course, I knew why she hadn't seen Mitch, but there was no way I would have told her about it. I really didn't want her to leave. Despite the betrayal, I still loved her. I wanted to tell her about it, but my stupid pride held me back. She spoke again before I could say anything. "John, as I recall, you said that we would be together as long as the children were at home. Is that right?" "Yes. I'm pregnant." 2 stupid people. Everything was not going as I expected. I got up and went outside. The fresh air helped me calm down. I was sitting on the veranda, staring at nothing. Courtney came out and sat next to me. She put her hand on mine, but she didn't say anything. We both had tears in our eyes. Now I realized that she really wanted to stay together. It was a desperate move on her part, and I'm sure she spent a lot of time preparing for it. "Did you know that I had a vasectomy 6 years ago?" "Yes. It was a despicable act. I also think you regretted what you did." "Why?" "Because it effectively ended our marriage. I didn't want it to end." "I didn't want that either. But I don't understand why you think pregnancy will change anything. As a result of your exposure, it would lead to the opposite result of what you wanted." I had no choice. If you had given me a clue or even some hope, I might have acted differently. I didn't want to lose you. "Good. I'll ask. Who was the father of the child?" Courtney reached into her apron pocket and pulled out an envelope. "It cost me more than $8,000. I have no idea who the father of the child is, but you and I will raise this child as our own. These are your conditions, and I will insist on fulfilling them." At the top of the form inside it was written, "The Lehigh Burks Infertility Clinic. End."